recent polls have shown a fifth of Americans can't locate the U.S. on a world map. Why do you think this is?
I personally believe that U.S. Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nation don't have maps, and I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future for our children.
Thank you very much, South Carolina.
I show the Miss Teen South Carolina video for two key reasons. First off, we have this misconception about geography, this kind of stereotypical view that it's going around learning about countries, learning about where rivers are, learning where the Iraq is and like such as. But I hope through the course of this semester, in particular this vodcast, we learn that it's much more than that. Secondly, if we think about overall United States compared to other countries, we're very geo-illiterate. And that video really showcased that. What that means is we, compared to others, have less geographical knowledge or awareness. So we have all these connections to the world, but we really don't know what those connections mean, where they come from, and what's going on in those particular places. So that's hopefully something that maybe not so much you, but maybe another person I'm hoping can benefit from this course in this particular vodcast. I show this map here. This isn't really too important. All it is there's a ton of individual political geography terms that describe countries throughout much of the world. All I'm saying is there's a ton of individual key terms that we would learn in a higher level geography course, in a political geography course, but we're going to focus on the main themes. And so the idea here is individual countries have many times their individual characteristics that make it unique politically when we think about it at the global level. Before we begin, there's three often confused terms, and these often confused terms I want us to kind of be able to differentiate. First off, country. Country is just purely a vast area of land. That's its real definition. But we also, when we say the word country, we're also saying the word state. So a state is just any area, any territory that is ruled over by a particular political unit. And so in a sense, the United States is one state. And we already know this. It's the Secretary of State, whoever that might be at the time. So we have the idea of a state and country are often synonymous, pretty much interchangeable terms. And so when I use the term state, don't just strictly think of it as being a particular state in the United States. Canada is a state. United Kingdom is a state. Russia is a state. And so we're going to use that term often, and so I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Thirdly, nation. Nation is a self-defined cultural, often ethnicity or social community. And so for you biology people, I think there's kingdom, phylum, class, order, something, family, speech, I don't know. But that big grouping, as far as grouping of living things on Earth, we've got our big groupings: reptiles, amphibians, mammals. So those are the big groupings. When we think about cultural groups or cultures, oftentimes the nation is the biggest grouping of a particular culture. So it's the highest order, the kingdom, so to speak, for you biologists. And the thing with a nation is a nation and a state aren't the same thing. And so in some cases, you're going to find a state that has within it multiple nations. And oftentimes, that's where we're going to see some conflict. So we're going to come back and use these terms throughout the rest of this podcast. I want to make sure we know what we're talking about when I use these key terms. Here's a map of the world. We see latitude, longitude, but other than that, you don't see any artificial or human-created things. So boundaries, some relate to physical boundaries. We'll talk more about that. But the idea of a border or boundary is a human-created thing. So it's a key term, key thing we're going to use in one of these earlier video lectures. During 1940, there were only about 50 countries or 50 states in the entire world. Today, there are 193 member countries or member states of the United Nations. Now, essentially, there's more countries than that, but we're just going to use that number. So we've gone from 50 to 193 states in the world over the last 60, 70 years. And so in your lifetime, we're going to continue to see more states being created, more states being added to this 193 number. All right, geopolitics. What are we going to do in the rest of this particular vodcast series when we study geopolitics? The thing about geopolitics, on the nightly news, whether it's CNN or Fox News or whatever's in between, or Jon Stewart show, or heck, the nightly news, you hear this term geopolitics all the time. And so that's something that's obviously very near and dear to a geographer's heart, something that we definitely try to understand more about, and especially as it's becoming a term used by more and more other people outside of geography, especially popular culture. What are we going to do with geopolitics? What are we going to do in this particular video lecture series is we're going to try to understand how does a new state come to be. Earlier I talked about how we got these new states that are going to be added in your lifetime. How does one happen? Can I just all of a sudden the state of Andy? Can I go and all of a sudden create my own state? Maybe I could, but there's a set of rules that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So we're going to understand the formation of countries and states. Key to that is the understanding of boundaries. So we're trying to understand different characteristics, different types of boundaries, and how those boundaries may lead or may not lead to conflict. Further, we're going to look at global alliances. And so earlier this semester I talked about globalization. So a key part of globalization is these regional or global alliances. For instance, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, all kinds of the World Wildlife Federation. So there's all these global alliances in which countries come together, they share ideas, and it's a new thing, and so we're going to try to understand a little bit more about that as well. Further, key to this is we're going to understand why conflict occurs where it does. Why can we, at the end of this semester, at the end of this video lecture, we're going to be able to predict where conflict is going to occur going forward. So we're going to look at those key cultural but also physical factors that are very much leading characteristics or leading factors to conflict, and try to understand why it occurs where it does. So in the future, you're going to hear about the Ukraine, for example. The Ukraine, I can guarantee you, is going to have conflict going forward. And so key to understanding that is there's some physical but key cultural differences within this country or the state of the Ukraine. So these are some of the key terms, key things we're going to look at in this particular video lecture series.